Hi there. I'm Vivek Khindria, Vice President of Cybersecurity and Technology Risk in Loblaw Companies Limited. It's a huge company. It's very exciting. It's a very agile culture here. We've got a lot of DevOps teams that are ramping up. The pace is great. The innovation is great. I think in the late 80s, early 90s, it was, not a lot of technology out there. But before I even get to those networks, my first role working in the physics department at McMaster, just building hardware that hung off of a mass spectrometer and collected data. I started to basically build my own circuits, build my own boards, build my own software right at the machine level. That gave me a special view that I could look at computers differently. And I knew what was inside, and I knew what was the software underneath the software that was underneath the software. So it always gave me a curious approach to any of the technology that we were looking at. When I got to the banks, I was building trading floors and development environments that supported trading floors. And these environments had all kinds of data flowing in and out of them from third parties. And these things were very time sensitive. So availability was important. Integrity of the information was really important. And even though I wasn't in security, I needed to implement security controls just to allow the business to operate in a predictable and reliable way. Heading into the 90s, we started to see technologies like firewalls and security testing start to emerge, but those were already baked in. A trader could detect 150 milliseconds change in latency. So every security piece that I was adding in was chipping away at that budget. So we had to really find a good balance between how do we protect that environment, keep it up, keep that information secure, and also give the performance that they needed. That high pressure environment, it was challenging. It required a lot of innovation, a lot of courage. And, for the business, they were looking, wow, this is costing us extra money. This is slowing us down. What about the customer experience? But then as the data points started to emerge, companies facing different breaches and different cyber challenges, then it was like, oh, good thing we did that. We've gone past an era of compliance. We've gone past an era of risk. People know cyber threats are out there. And now it's more an era of agility. It's how do we go faster? How do we do more? How do we predict? Security today, it's one of the most critical components of a risk management program. For most boards, it's the number one threat that they're trying to manage. So it gets lots of attention. As an industry, it's matured. And so there's lots of subspecialties now in security. You got cryptography, you got incident response, you got assurance, vulnerability management, penetration testing, access management, on and on and on. Lots of subspecialties that make it daunting for any security professional to stay on top of multiples of those categories. Like I was saying, top priority for boards. So it's a regular topic that needs to be spoken to. I think there's a whole plethora of frameworks and standards that are available today, including NIST, including CSA for cloud security, ISF standard of good practice, ISO, on and on and on. So lots of sources of what to do. I think there's also a lot more education options, university and college programs dedicated to cybersecurity, professional certifications. Look at CSSP, CISM, and also the GIAC certifications. There's also today in the industry a lot of information. Cyber threat reports, cyber threat intelligence feeds. There's all kinds of data. It's overwhelming. And I think, lastly, I'll say current state of cybersecurity it is a global challenge. It crosses many different legal boundaries. And the threat actors that are participating in this are not only cyber criminals, not only intellectual property motivated corporate espionage, also nation states, foreign governments are also participating in this, which makes it very challenging. I think what's exciting right now in terms of automation is everything has become code. Not just the application, not just the server, not just the cloud, the infrastructure as well. And so that's exciting because now we can actually, check that code, test the code, repeat the code. And gone are the days where people are going to be pressing buttons and turning knobs to make things happen in the infrastructure. So everything's code, everything's cloud. most companies have accepted, their destiny to move into the cloud, take advantage of the elasticity, take advantage of the availability, and all of those pieces that come along with it. So, if your teams aren't working with Jenkins or with Kubernetes or with Terraform, then you're probably still manually building your environments, and that's not going to allow you to have the agility that you're going to need going forward. Configuring our security systems to alert on basic correlation is it's a never-ending game. Got to do it, but it's never going to be enough. So as all of the major security vendors are baking in more analytics, see some of the larger enterprises start to build their own data lakes to do anomaly detection. Whether looking at the network, looking at user behavior, looking at IoT devices, that's going to be a key part of security trends going forward. We want to get to the point where we can see something, react, have automation, have self-healing, have self-recovering. The days of designing a failover system are gone. It's constantly live and load balanced. So we have a cluster of systems that are load balanced. We can pull one out, upgrade it, and nobody even knows the whole thing is down. So we're moving more and more to those models, which is really a zero outage model. The other trend that's becoming very important is, we've gone from continuous, from testing pen tests once a year, vulnerability scans every quarter, to now continuous modes of testing. I think the next realm is going to be continuous monitoring of our configurations. And what we saw in the Capital One breach, as an example, having fleets of clouds, hundreds of clouds, how are you going to stay on top of those configurations to make sure they don't drift, they don't change, you don't lose control? And so there are tools that are emerging that allow basically quick detection of any of those, quick rollback of any of those changes so that fleets of those clouds can be managed properly at scale. I think the other trend right now is monitoring of criminal activity is at an all-time high. Most large enterprises do have some kind of dark web service, ability to get threat intel on the various APT groups that are affecting either their sector or their country or their interests. And understanding, what those threat actors do, what their tools and techniques are, their tradecraft becomes important in terms of prioritizing what layers of defense the enterprises are going to activate. I think there's a couple of holdups, in taking full advantage of those trends. The elasticity of the cloud is great, but when you come back to a hardware security module to manage your critical certificates and keys, may not be scaling the same way. So actually, saw some innovation coming out of Israel around software-based HSMs that are actually achieving FIPS 140 Type 2 certifications, which is the first time, that's ever happened. I think that all of the vendors have been pushing ahead into analytic extensions, machine learning extensions to their products, which is great. But, I think we're all working in environments where we have multiple vendor products. And so I think they need to assume that customers are going to have their own data lake. They're going to have their own data analytics. And if you look at what many of the Canadian financial institutions are doing around fusion centers, it's about bringing security data and fraud data together for very customized analytic models to detect the fraud and detect the anomalous behavior in more complex scenarios. I think that will be a competitive differentiator as we start to develop those models to support business decisions and give risk direction on certain activities for follow-up or for approval. We got to look at countries like Israel and see how they've managed with such a small population to create so much innovation in the cybersecurity space. Year after year, they continue to really impress. I think many of my peers and colleagues with innovative ideas. So I think there's something to be learned there, and we need to tap that. We can get caught up with, what was the latest breach, and oversteer on why that breach happened. We can get caught up in the latest technologies, AI and machine learning, and then forget that at the end of the day, we still need to maintain our basic hygiene. So I think a number of companies have to make sure, are they patching? Are they hardening? Are they testing? Are they logging? Do they have their logs monitored? Are they managing access? Are they marching out end-of-life systems? That part can't be ignored. That's got to be the foundation for the security house. And it's important to make sure we bake that into all of our thinking and planning. Two of the pieces that become really critical in that is asset management and vendor management. And so, asset management, I think, is a critical business function that's underpinning for security. And, tools have to be able to talk to asset management systems. Asset management systems need to be able to discover and maintain what do we have, how current is it, how is it configured, where is it, etc. Likewise, on vendor management, companies need to have a clear line of sight. Who are our vendors? What are our contracts? What are the obligations? Where do we have cyber insurance? Who tests what? How often is it tested? How often do you go and kick the tires? So all of those become very important in terms of planning for the future. One of the things we're seeing, as we go forward, IoT devices, operation technologies are being connected to internet and corporate networks like never before. And this brings along with it human safety issues as well. So we're starting to get our heads around what does it mean when you connect automation in the warehouse into a internet connected network, and what does that mean from a security point of view? How do you defend against drones that may enter a workspace or a building? What are the possible threats that can happen there, both from cyber perspective and from a safety perspective? As we see bots, automated attack weapons spin up, we're also starting to see good bots, legitimate bots that are people trying to do work or buy concert tickets. And, it's going to be challenging to try to separate between malicious bots, criminal bots, and good bots, because they're both going to be fighting for, some same resources. And I think the last one is impersonation. At the end of the day, when we're trying to trust somebody calling into the help desk or call into the finance department, we don't have a passport to hand over across the phone. And, the fallback ends up being, employee number or birth date or start date. And, some people might recognize the voice, and all those are out the window now. From a trust perspective, those will not be the basis of trust for high value transactions. As witnessed in the news recently with deepfake, somebody impersonated a CEO's voice, and you can see that on scale becomes very hard to manage and really puts a lot of pressure on our help desks and any of those services that are supporting our executives. For people that want to work in the cybersecurity industry, I'd say, if you're lucky enough to get the chance, do the role. First of all, know what your crown jewels are. Know what data and systems matter to the company. I highly recommend that you cross-train. A career that from start to finish is in security has limited runway. I think getting some experience of building things, developing things, working with the business, delivering projects is vital to making sure there's a reality check in any of the security advice and activity that's going on. Otherwise, you just become someone in the ivory tower that's giving you advice and has no notches in the belt to understand the difficulty and the challenges that the business has and actually trying to achieve those results. I'd also say, for anyone, learn to write code. Python is very accessible. SQL is very accessible. Unless you're writing code, you're not going to understand what we need to do from a security perspective. Training the developers, testing the code, looking at vulnerabilities, red teaming those codes. You need to have hands-on experience on that. And then, spend time with the business. Try to understand what their challenges are and try to understand what the risk appetite is. So when we're putting costs, controls on the table, that they're all aligned. We could have the most secure system, but then if no customer is going to use it, what's the point? And lastly, we have to start to learn what are the tactics used by the criminals. What are they doing? What are the techniques they're doing? And how are we going to be able to detect it? And having some multiple layers. When I look at cybersecurity professionals that I want to hire, I look for people that have courage. They're going to be tough days. They have to have resilience. Things will fail. Things won't go their way. They need to keep going. They need to be able to march on. They have to have excellent communication skills. I sometimes think of our job as a translator role. We're talking between privacy and IT and the business and security and enterprise risk management. Those are all different language domains, and security kind of sits in the middle of it all and tries to translate and make things happen. Yeah, I love it. I got an early preview copy and, just the credentials of all the authors. I know most of them and just a fantastic group. And, I read several of the chapters, and what I found was it was timely and it was a practitioner's point of view of what they're doing. And I felt like in some of the chapters, I was just having a conversation with another CISO. So I like the light narrative that's in them. For example, Hugh Thompson, he kind of takes apart the whole term zero trust, and every vendor is putting zero trust stickers on their products, whether they realize what it means or not. And so I thought he did a great job of breaking that down. Imran Bashir, I think what I liked about him, he was really rallying to the defense of the employee. We're targeting employees, we're blaming employees. And, what I liked what he's saying is at the end of the day, we have to get technology right. Most companies are filtering spam, and, 98% of the email is being filtered as undesirable or, malicious. And so if that technology wasn't in place, then Billy and Susie reading their emails have no chance. So I liked what he was saying. I really liked he was an advocate for the staff in our companies, which was great. Bobby, hits a couple of notes around making sure we engage the top of the house, getting those champions, getting the executive sponsorship, getting the executive ownership as being really key. I think he's got some good experience there and some good words of wisdom. I also like Michael Castro's chapter. He talks about vendor management and vendor managers being key. I completely agree with Michael on that point. And, I just will go a step further and say not only security should be at the table, maybe security drives the whole vendor management risk profile, which is one of the things I'm pushing for here. But all in all, the book is great. I'll be finishing the other chapters in short order, and I'm very excited about its release. It's even better than the first one. And it's got a great list of authors and good coverage of very timely topics. I think it's really important that as security professionals, we share. We share practices, we share trends, we share specific threats. We're all in this game together. At the end of the day, we want to protect, Canadians. And we need to make sure that, we're doing more than what criminals are doing. And criminals are really good at sharing information between themselves. We have to be even better. So when I look at CLX Forum, it's an opportunity for, a Canadian point of view on the situation. This really helps bring a reality check in terms of what's practical, what are others doing, what should we be doing. And, the entire Canadian economy, 50,000 small and medium-sized businesses, they need help. And if they go, that impacts every company, every bank. So the more we can do through CLX Forum and groups like CCTX, Canadian Cyber Threat Exchange, that allows us to share that information, which is our supply chain, and keeps them strong. I think the other thing I like about CLX Forum is it's promoting some Canadian thought leadership. I think there's a number of folks that I count on and I like to talk to, and it's great that we can stand that up. Canada is a special place. We're known as innovators. We have a hotbed of AI and machine learning. We have one of the most online populations in the world. Companies all over the world come to Canada to test stuff. And so with all of that, there's no reason why Canada can't become the most cyber secure country in the world. And I hope with things like CLX Forum, we can help push that forward and share and educate and really lift the bar across the country.